10% of American university only for research and teaching graduate studies. Because the rest administrative work is something you don't want to do. And people say, why? You don't know. You have no idea. So yeah. So what's your area?
It's youth studies, so where we deal with youth work and youth participation. No, yes, definitely.
I don't know if I have my card, but
I'm sure I don't.
Yeah, yeah, maybe swap emails.
Yeah, for sure. No problem. Should we start? Okay, Boyan, should we start? Yeah.
Now it's
Hello, everybody. As you already know, I'm Anastasia. I'm going to be moderating this discussion. It is, of course, an open discussion. If at any point you have a question, please feel free to ask our experts anything that interests you, hopefully pertaining to their areas of expertise. Due to technological constraints, I'm going to be sitting here behind this table for half of the room. You won't really be able to see me, nor I you, but Dan is going to be here in case you have a question and raise your hand. Dan is going to communicate that to me. So even if you're sitting here, you may still ask questions. Okay. So welcome everybody to this roundtable discussion on youth participation. I would like to first ask the panelists to introduce themselves. We have here Marko Kovacic and Shadi Abu Ayash.
all right. Hi everyone. Probably I've met all of you so far, and my name is Shadi Abu Ayash. I come from a town called Ramallah, north of Jerusalem in Palestine. I teach in media studies at the university. And that's all, but I need to thank Anastasia and the Anna Lynn Foundation and the ADIA and the Croatian Debate Society for, inviting me to be part of this wonderful week. It's been a learning process for me, honestly. I mean, I'm an outsider, so excuse my, superficiality if I'm not into this industry, if I may call it the industry or field of debate, but thank you, Anastasia.
No problem. Marko?
Well, good afternoon. My name is Marko Kovacic, and I'm a research fellow and assistant professor in youth studies. I work at the Institute for Social Research here in Zagreb and teach at the University of Rijeka. And basically, my area of interest is this. So I'm particularly interested in youth participation and youth work at the European level, but also national and locals. And I'm really looking forward, just to engaging into discussion about topics that which interests we share.
Thank you very much. So let's now start with a general question. I think some of the participants in this room have been to designated lectures during this conference having to do with youth work and youth participation. But for those of them who did not attend those specific lectures, Marko, would you be able to explain what constitutes youth work and what exactly do we mean by youth participation?
Okay, so the question about youth work is, of course, is the lingering one, and it's ongoing for the last, I would say, 40 years, because, every time when we gather in this kind of forums, we discuss what youth work is and what youth work isn't. And of course, neither we as researchers or scholars nor policymakers managed to give the unanimous definition of what youth work is. But what we managed to do was actually to conceptualize youth work. And basically, when someone would ask me, and you just did, what youth work is, I would say that it's a special sphere of the social reality where young people are to be empowered, engaged and included in various or involved in various aspects of society, meaning that there is a very clear relationship between young people and youth workers. And the general idea is to develop individual, personal, social and political competences of young people. It is usually situated outside the formal educational system. It doesn't mean that youth work cannot happen within formal education system. For instance, debate clubs are the very good example how this could work. Nevertheless, basically, the general idea is also that young people can participate in the process of creating various activities, meanings, and this is the biggest difference between formal education and informal education or youth work, where in formal education there is a very limited space for young people, to co-create the process, whereas in youth work this is one of the prerequisites. When we talk about participation, and I'm going to be much shorter about it because we know what participation is, it's a meaningful involvement of young people in various social and political affairs. In other words, participation, there are two modes of participation. One is the civic participation, which deals with the development of civil and social and cultural capital, and political participation when the main goal or the end goal is to influence decision-making process.
Okay, so we covered kind of that youth work has to do with trying to get young people involved with the creation of different policies. Shadi, what would you say, like from the perspective of somebody who's involved primarily with formal education? Is there potential for formal education to encourage that kind of participation for young people as well? And how do you see this playing out in your own community and university?
Actually, when it came ahead in mind to talk about this point exactly. Now, again, I'm sorry in advance if for my limited knowledge on this field, but I thought, throughout this week, and I thought there is opportunity for I don't know if the association has been working on the policy level of kind of I wouldn't say enforcing, but pushing forward the idea of making debate as part of the curriculum. And I don't know how is that even doable but this is international association that can its policies may influence all schools around the world. So and it came to my mind, and maybe I'm being talking from my own perspective from media, and I've kind of discussed media literacy earlier this week. So maybe there's a window of opportunity where media literacy and debating can combine. And this is not an idea that just you may dismiss it, of course, you may debate it, but there are a lot of similarities in the method of media literacy and debating. And I think, and because media literacy now is a kind of a trend worldwide, and this would be a window of opportunity for debate societies and for the association actually to work forward on kind of make it formal. I think, this kind of work we do, as I said, this is the first time to me to be engaged in this kind of activity surrounded on debate. But this kind of work would develop societies, develop individual citizens. So I think media literacy, because we live in a digitalized world, media literacy can cover the digital aspect of our life, and debate can also kind of cover the critical thinking and building the citizen. So I think it would be a great idea if you kind of consider putting or pushing forward in your agenda the policies. You could start with a few countries, but then this idea would spread, and you have the support of UNESCO, which works actually heavily on this area. So to sum it up, I think media literacy can go hand by hand with debate and being a formal within the curriculum. So this is kind of idea. I don't know if you already worked on that. I'm not aware of your history of the association history and working with policies, but that's maybe I think, because if it's in speaking of formal. Students would be more involved, more engaged with the curriculum. We know, students, okay, with school, we want to volunteer here and there, but it's in my own time, if I have exams, I wouldn't have that much time, unless you are they are committed like you to this. But I think it would be a great idea to introduce media literacy and a debate within media literacy, or media literacy within debate. Whose umbrella, who's under others' umbrella, it's not the issue, but it should, I think they could go hand by hand and be kind of introduced to policymakers that maybe we should try to think introducing debate as a formal curriculum, formal course within high schools, students, maybe elementary students. So that's my take, and this is, I think, that's maybe this is from media perspective. Sorry, but that's
this is one of the reasons why we wanted to have you over, precisely because you specialize in media literacy, and it is one of the areas of focus for many projects that we are trying to engage with now, or starting now, or just like funding opportunities in general.
And there are, I think, funding opportunities. As I mentioned, I mean, I don't speak for UNESCO or for MLN, but I work with UNESCO in Palestine for several projects, mainly dedicated to media literacy, because, it's the world we live in. It's mediatized world where every time, I mean, whatever in your daily activities, you use the content of media, so you need to have critical thinking aspect or critical thinking way of using media, and debate as well actually covers the mentality, the way you should think, and the way you could build your own opinion. So that's if I have to vote for something, I will vote for this idea today.
Okay. That's good to hear. So speaking about youth participation, Marco, you used to be a debater and a debate coach yourself. Do you think there's anything specific about debate that makes it a worthwhile activity in encouraging youth participation and active citizenship, or no? And can you go a little bit in depth in what is it from your experience in the field of youth work and research into young people? What is it? Is there anything specific about debate, or are there any other activities that can be comprehensive in trying to develop the skills that young people need to engage with policymakers, for example?
Well, debaters are very persuasive and annoying, so that's always good. Especially if you talk or want to influence, decision-making process, so they don't have problems with, self-confidence and so on and so forth. But I would say that from my point of view as a former debater and also, debate coach, debate trainer, coordinated Croatian Debate Society, so everything that I could have been, is that right now, from the perspective of researchers, I believe the debate is one of the best methods actually to teach participation per se, because basically debate allows you to put yourselves into different shoes and to build your own, argumentational line that can be then later on delivered into various forms. When we talk about the debates and participation, I don't think that one goes without another. Every time when you have, debaters in front of you, when they prepare cases, they have to explore, and debaters also, they're not they're not mere recipients of your ideas. You're the one who should create, enabling environment for them to express themselves about a certain issue. And this is the goal of debate teacher or youth worker in debate, to create this enabling environment for young people to express themselves, which is a very good base, of course, later on for, more formal ways of participation. So I think that the basis or the key for quality participation when we talk about debate is preparation and the work within debate clubs. So debate teachers and youth workers in the field of debate have a very big responsibility into actually allowing young people to express themselves, and also they need, or you need to, or from my point of view, this is how I was doing when I was teaching debate, is I wanted to be challenged. I want for young people not to take me as a final authority, but I want them just to, if I say something, that they're gonna just challenge me to some extent. And this is very important when we talk about participation, because if you develop this kind of stuff, that there's no absolute truth, that everything is relative, that we use this Karl Popper idea from which debate emerged into this Western part of the hemisphere, basically that if there's no absolute truth, then it's very important, that you have arguments, that are sound, that are sound, and that you can persuade this other with big O that you want to persuade. So from my point of view, debate is a very good method, just to develop various personal competences, but also, just to engage young people into topics that perhaps they wouldn't be engaged if they would be only involved into formal education. I don't know whether this answers your question,
yeah.
But this is.
And I think that we discussed this in various workshops throughout this conference. We tend to think of debate as a possible link and not for us, not possible, but very obvious, and a very strong link between young people and becoming engaged, active participants in their communities and societies. So we already know that this method works. Now, my question to both of you is, coming from two different countries, both Mediterranean, but on different sides, Marco is Croatian and Shadi is from Palestine. What are the opportunities in terms of any kind of support by either local or national governments or any international bodies that you can that you know of in your communities, in your countries, that support youth participation, and what does this support look like? Shadi?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I think, and that's from my country's experience, and probably applies in other countries, initiatives like local initiatives that comes from the local community works better than applied from authorities or governments. I mean, debate issue, and I was wondering why we don't have one in Palestine. I searched for a community, and I thought there is a society that's not specialized in debate, but works in other fields, but usually kind of organized from time to time debate contests. I think it has to come from the society. It has to come from societies and people, but they need some help. They need some guidance. So I think if we leave it to authorities, it will take. I mean, it's not really a bad idea because that there's. Okay, can I? All right. Okay, well, I'm saying the idea of initiatives probably they have to come from societies, from youth, young people from schools or either neighborhoods. In Palestine, just to give an example, I was saying there is a group, there is not specialized, dedicated group to debate, but there is a society that, among its work organizing contest on debate. I want to talk, I mean, if you allow me, Anastasia, and
Sure.
you've mentioned Mark and I come from around the Mediterranean. There's yesterday I kind of delivered some insights into Anna Lynn's intercultural trends report, and the main report, this report actually, thank you, it will solve it. So Anna Lynn's report, I'm not going to repeat yesterday's lecture. Oh, okay, all right. Okay, thank you. Again, if you don't mind. So what I was talking about how youth, I mean, I'll take it to a different level where youth can participate across the Mediterranean, maybe kind of think of initiatives. I'm not going to hijack the report for Anna Lind, the discussion, but I need to mention this because it's kind of related to your question of young people participation, and I think we may be, I mean, in the local level it's important, but maybe we should think regional, and that where I advise you and suggest you all go online for Anna Lind website where you could see it should come out in September this month, actually, the intercultural trends report, which kind of asks young people, including young people across the Mediterranean, across the sea, also how they consume information about each other. And this brings me to the idea of again, media, but excuse me for talking about this, but young participation is important, but also to kind of look at the content, media content, because we have fake news that fills out the internet. So again, I mean, what you do here is coming back to the main idea I was, I will be advocating for actually coming out of this workshop. I'll be advocating this. You have an advocate in Pakistan for your cause, but I'll be advocating the idea of putting a debate within media literacy or the other way around. Because if we think of the regional, because this report, the reason why I'm talking about this report, because there are some data that suggest that we don't know about each other. The South doesn't know much about the North, and that's probably because we don't communicate. So initiatives, back to your question, initiatives that comes from young people, that dedicated to kind of working regionally, or two regions, the north and the south of the sea, would probably help. Now, authorities, yes, are interested always in formal education, in budget issues. We don't have much money for that, so that's why I'm saying that main point, that initiative that comes up from the root, from the, think of it as a social movement. They come from the field. They don't come from the top. They come from the bottom. So thinking about that on the regional level. Sorry, yeah, there's a question there.
No, somebody was saying.
Okay, so to sum my point up, we may want to think regionally. There are organizations that support this idea. Analytic, probably, I don't know, for them, but that's the field they work on, kind of bringing, bridging the gap of communication. So thinking of a regional work on debate, including media literacy, or combine it with media literacy, that comes out from the bottom, from the school, from initiatives from down, from down to up, not from up to down, that would work more than relying on authorities and governments. I mean, speaking from my experience and other countries' experience, but that doesn't mean, Anastasia, that we should leave, not kind of lobby authorities or governments that maybe we should put this debate curriculum on the table for discussion to be within the formal education system. That's what I think. I don't know if that even answers your question.
Okay, Marco, what would you say are the opportunities for youth participation? What does that landscape look like in, for example, the European Union, which Croatia is a member of as of relatively recently? So what does it look like here?
If I talk without the mic, can you hear me? Yes. Yes, thank you so much, because then I can, just do all the gesticulation. To make my point more dramatic, of course. I would say that basically living in Europe, but in Europe right now for young people is probably the best place to live. When it comes to opportunities that participation, the participation frameworks are being offered. On the one hand, we have Council of Europe, which is in its basis, basically ever since it was established in 1948, basically very much focuses on the youth participation per se. Therefore, you have various youth centers in Strasbourg, in Budapest, where different training courses are being delivered, where youth participation is being harvested from. Then there's a youth advisory council, co-management system, various policy initiatives such as youth reviews. So basically within Council of Europe, there are various opportunities that exist that young people can use if they have enough and sufficient information. And that's why you're here, to offer them this information that exists. You're the spokespersons for people, yeah, for various initiatives and opportunities that exist. For instance, did you know that you can within your debate club apply for youth foundation projects, and that you can get for instance 5,000 euros, I think, for implementing small initiative within your communities. This is something that Council of Europe offers and promotes youth participation in that way. On the other hand, we have another, sui generis political organization, which is European Union. And you asked me about that. So European Union does offer also different opportunities. On the one hand, of course, throughout Erasmus Plus and youth participation projects, but also, key action to projects. Basically, young people can not only travel, but also, acquire various competences and change certain things within their communities. But when we talk about changing things and changing communities, we mustn't forget European Solidarity Course. European Solidarity Course, as a younger sister of Erasmus Plus, basically is focused on young people and developing solidarity within various communities. For instance, Croatia faced the earthquake very recently, a year ago,
A year and a half ago in Zagreb, and then late December.
Okay,
The
so
other
we
one.
so this part of Croatia faced a very devastating, earthquake, and basically throughout European Solidarity Corps, there are various youth organizations that brought various volunteers, despite the COVID-19 pandemics, to help to rebuild this part of Croatia, because the main point is, of course, to engage young people in various societal and communal processes. So this is something that European Union is offering. In addition to this, of course, we cannot forget, or we shouldn't forget about the structured dialogue, or EU dialogue. I'm sure you all know about it, so I'm not going to talk about it. But basically, this is how the youth policy in European Union is being created. So throughout the process of a very structured consultation that lasts for 18 months, basically European Union is harvesting and collecting opinions of young people, which are later on implemented into resolutions that council brings. So apart from that, of course, throughout various other mechanisms, very different youth organizations are being supported. And IDEA also is an example how, because it's being funded partially throughout some European funds, how you then later on can create this enabling environment for youth participation. So I would say that the mechanisms and the infrastructure exists. We can of course discuss whether this mechanism and this infrastructure is sufficient, whether we can advance it to some extent. But however, I would say that from my personal experience, not personal, my professional experience, basically right now Europe is really offering the most out of all other regions when it comes to youth participation, because both Council of Europe and European Commission, at least nominally or declaratory, basically promotes youth participation, and this is being put into the heart of both of the organizations.
Okay, and now it gets interesting. We talked about the benefits. Now let's talk about the limitations. I mean, we are here, various representatives from various organizations here are also the beneficiaries of some European Union programs. This particular conference is financed partially through a European for Citizens grant and partially through a Key Action 2 Erasmus Plus project. So we're here because this was funded through European Union funds, and there are definitely many opportunities. My question to you, Marko, is what do you think about whether the potential of these activities has been realized, or are they still underused?
So it's underused, definitely. So to cut long story short. So when we talk about structured dialogue or EU dialogue, basically apart from youth goals, which we have now 11 youth goals, which are important, basically nothing happened. So the European Union can talk about youth participation however it wants and whatever it wants it can say. But basically, if you take a look at the real impact of the youth participation per se, you won't see much. But we will see perhaps, within various forums, unorganized youth or youth that are dedicated to one goal. For instance, this whole movement Fridays for Future, and with Greta and her idea of climate justice. Basically, this is something that really made the policymakers within the European Union, but also Council of Europe, to think about it. So I would say, for instance, some of the mechanisms, they don't work. For instance, Erasmus Plus. This the biggest I would say blame of the Erasmus Plus this period from 2014 to 2021 was that it wasn't inclusive enough. So it's a very elitist program. So
why do you think that is? How does that play out? What's elitist about it? What are the obstacles to people who are not engaged in private education or living in well-off countries?
I think that this is a great question for the audience, because I'm sure that you have your opinion about it. So why do you think that the research and the scholars basically what they say is that Erasmus Plus is elitist project?
Anybody have any ideas? Any experiences? No?
Oh, I'm sure that they will. You just have to wait long enough and someone will start talking. No, come on. This is something that you have to know. If you deal with young people, there's 100% that you came up with this, that Erasmus is an elitist project.
Somebody raised their hand? Oh, okay,
Hello.
Dan is on it.
Yeah, I think the thinking of the commission behind it is that being cautious pays off, that they would rather give it only to the institutions that will deliver projects even if they are not very innovative or not groundbreaking, but they will not be accused of wasting money and giving it to shady organizations, which sometimes means that we will not get funding because we are holding money for say 10 years and we are not a university. But I guess the approach is that it's better to be cautious than to be accused of money laundering and giving money only to political friends and so on. It's also, in some reports indicated that organizations that have an office in Brussels get most of half of the funding, something like that, which you can think about it in that way that it's counterproductive. But I also understand that it's a sign of some of organization being mature, that it can afford to have an office somewhere else, but it surely brings some resentment towards it, even from the NGOs.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I think that this was a very good, remark, but also apart from this, there is something that is called preaching to the choir. Take a look at your debaters. Who are they? So what is the profile of your debaters in general?
Coach from Croatian Debate Society recently did a master's thesis on this very question for the for Croatia. Somebody wanted to say something? Yeah.
I think it really depends on which types of projects you look, because if you look at the national teams that go to WSDC and compete in the national tournament, of course, that's a very different profile to perhaps some of the more grant funded projects where we specifically apply for to go to more marginalized communities, perhaps more rural places where the parents and the schools wouldn't be able to pay for it, but the grant funders pay for it, or maybe some other partners pay for it for us to go there. So I think the difference between who volunteers for these types of activities versus what kind of debaters we can reach with different grant funded projects. And of course, I think your question is mostly about this kind of more elite, WSDC type team. Of course, these tend to be really good students, but also capital parents that tend to care about their education.
Cultural capitalism. I mean, definitely. And this was.
I'm raising my hand.
Okay.
I just wanted to add maybe a different sort of experience. I mean, it also has to do with how do we define the term elitist. In Croatia, most schools are public schools. There are very few private schools. And so there is, I wouldn't say there is elite education in Croatia at all. But for example, Eta Krpanec's findings for her master's thesis were that even I think up to 80% of our debaters, even though the participation in our debate program is free of charge, and even though it takes place predominantly, and I'm talking like over 98% of the times in public schools, the kids who tend to engage in debate are kids who, for example, whose parents have university education. So they are going to be more supportive of their kids attending. On average, they are from households that earn more money. So even in situations where we don't really have elite education per se, the kids who tend to engage with the program, at least here, seem to be those that have more social capital in a way than maybe some other kids, even though it's nominally available to everybody who's attending the school.
And that precisely is the problem. So when we did the evaluation of this Erasmus program from 2014, 2021, basically the biggest, finding was that despite the fact that Erasmus nominally, promotes young people from disadvantaged areas
With fewer opportunities.
With fewer opportunities, yes, that basically, the both exchange things and trainings and seminars that we, offer throughout Erasmus are being mostly, attended by people with higher social capital, with higher cultural capital. And then, the European Commission said, okay, so that's why we need to change something. And that's why, at the end, actually, this wasn't said by European Commission. European Commission is a bit big bad wolf in this story. But European Parliament basically insisted to double the money. So that's why from this 7-year period, we have 30 billion euros in Erasmus, with the goal basically to attract young people from rural areas, remote areas, various minorities, and so on and so forth.
What would you say real quick, what is the missing link? Why do you think that even though these opportunities are nominally available to anybody, and somebody from a rural school or somebody from a small organization, they might not be able to write a huge project for 300,000 euros, but these smaller opportunities as a start should be available to them? Why do you think is it that they are not utilizing these opportunities? Where's the problem?
I would say the lack of information, definitely.
I mean, may I just a question?
Please.
I'm totally unaware of their selection, but all the selection criteria, does it affect? I mean, there is a committee who doesn't know who's applying, so maybe the selection criteria needs to be modified, maybe in a way.
Absolutely, and this is something that the colleagues mentioned here. It's much easier always to get the money to your organization that that is going to carry on the
You have
project.
previous knowledge.
Yeah, of course. So of course, with this new program, this is all taken into consideration. We will see whether this will work out. But to answer to your question, I would say that the availability of information is definitely something that we need to work on. So to how we inform people, whether we use the adequate media. I'm sure that you can say something about it, because where these young people and youth workers can find the information. But not only that, this is the one reason. Another reason is that if you, for instance, have to cope with bringing food to your plate, you want to go in abroad, because you have to fulfill your primary needs that need to be right. But I'm sure that just the availability of information and the ability to process this information is very important. I don't know whether you would agree.
Yeah, I mean, if I totally agree, but again, I'm not aware of the specifications of Erasmus program, how does it work? But in general, I mean, back to the idea that we need, maybe if you want to change area, the association can play a role with their volunteers, of course, and the national societies of kind of lobbying that through media. I mean, one way actually through media, kind of the production of content that focuses. We have a problem here. I mean, we don't have the opportunities. I mean, in addition to the policies we're working on, I don't know if this year or tomorrow's meeting we're going to be discussing long-term
Strategy. Yeah.
strategy. So maybe you want to consider how much we need to advocate for equal opportunities of applying for funding through the use of media. Now social media is a free. I mean, it's not really totally free, but it's one effective tool. I don't know how much the decision makers in the European Commission and European Union do look at the social media, but of course it makes a noise, and it's important to make a noise through media that we have an issue here. Maybe we need to have good opportunities for funding through media. I mean, you have an army of volunteers that you could use. That's probably one way to. And in addition to the face-to-face meeting, that media is not would not substitute face-to-face meeting in the rooms. And how lobbying works. You see a parliament members, European Parliament members. I mean, if they have a say in that, maybe you should approach them, because otherwise, I mean, it would be only discussion in closed rooms if you don't approach them through media. And so that's
I mean, we have to be fair and say that national agency that exists in every single country where Erasmus Plus and European Solidarity Corps exist. Of course, there's a national agency which administrates these two programs. They are trying, just to engage into various processes of information and, counseling in regard to the project. But the problem is that basically the European Commission and the allocation of funds. Because if you take a look how much money does go into, for instance, Germany in opposed to Latvia, for instance, this is a big gap, because you have decentralized projects, but you also have centralized projects that you apply to Brussels. And basically these projects, there's no some kind of quota for Eastern Europe. Europe, for instance. There is quota for Eastern Europe, for instance, in Horizon projects, because it was FP 5, 6, 7. This is the research project. So Erasmus is for young people and for mobility schemes, and Horizon projects are for
2020.
Horizon 2020, yeah, are for research stuff. And basically, throughout I would say last 20 years, it has been proven that basically all the Eastern European countries they cannot compete with, I don't know, Oxford or I don't know, ETH in Switzerland and so on and so forth. Therefore, from this period, basically, there is a sort of positive discrimination or affirmative action, so forth, so-called, that, there is a bunch of money that goes only towards Eastern Europe. Because if we want, to have Europe that develops at the same time all its regions, then you have to have this kind of you have to make this kind of
Thank you. Are there any questions at this point?
I have a comment to make.
Mhm.
So you mentioned a lot of Erasmus projects for the system of the European Union, and I just want to make a comment about organizations. So basically, what is the problem here is here that it doesn't exist like a mentorship or a coaching program for this organization to develop be bigger, but at some point, I mean, I have to something here, just like the presidency work for bigger organization. So it looks like that there is this kind of gap also here. It's like similar to the rest of society. If you are like a big company, then you can do everything. If there's more one, if you're lucky to take 40 years to be big, then the rest of them will just disappear. Same thing like for youth organizations and civil society organizations. It exists like a coaching system or a mentoring system where they allow also these young organizations, those small organizations to have their chances to be big as well if they like to do or. And I think that it doesn't exist. So 99% will just disappear, and then people will just have to go to big organizations that exist like for 70 years or 8 years or 100 years. People maybe not there.
I mean, this is a very, very important issue that you raised, and thank you for this, because this idea of sustainability of youth organization and basically the whole youth movement has always been, a problem, especially because right now at the level of both European Union and Council of Europe, there's no mechanisms, for long-term projects. There is like, Erasmus lasts for what, 2 years? Top three or so.
If a bigger project,
bigger project, but there's no program program focused funding, and basically we all suffer from projectivization. We just apply more and more and more projects, and then basically you work for the project and not for the young people. And this is something that these bureaucrats in Brussels, they cannot realize that this is basically what's killing the sector. But then on the other hand, what they're saying is, when we just approach to them and say to them, but Erasmus is not the only one. You have national funding sources. Your country, your state is supposed, or local, administrative unit is supposed to, create also funding opportunities for this kind of stuff. You can, use Erasmus or European Solidarity Course, or I don't know, Youth Foundation from Council of Europe, just to supplement some of Europe. But unfortunately, we know that in most countries that does not happen. And then you have what you just said.
Yeah, I can make no comments. There are all the people.
Does anybody else have a question or a comment to make? Oh, we have somebody.
It's a common maybe slash question. Going back a little bit about also the matter about the elitism in the debate board. I think, and my question would be, you agree with this? It also depends maybe from the goal that you have as an organization. Because, for example, in our really young experience in Italy, the goal is not much that of sending students into international competitions and creating these very strong debaters and stuff, but more of introducing people to the correct way of communicating, to have interest in social matters and politics, because these are arguments that in our country are very are felt like they're very away from students. And what we have seen, at least in my experience, and in the first years when competition was not really that strong, was that many students that were not so strong in school or didn't have such culture, they took actually this chance as some sort of revenge or a way to get better and be able to confront themselves with the other students that were maybe a little more forward.
Thank you. Any comments from the panel? Yeah.
Would you think that if we used part of all the funds that they use support regions, especially the disadvantaged people, if it went to raising awareness about how to apply to these things or how to do such projects in new countries and stuff, would that be better than rather than spending all the money in the project itself? What do you think?
Marco?
Yes, I guess this could be one of the ways. I really, I always think that what the main goal of debate also, but not only debate, the whole youth work is to inform young people about the opportunities that exist and opportunities that don't exist, but could exist per se. So of course, if you build, competences within young people, but, generic competences, for instance, advocacy, for instance, intellectual competence, or I don't know, so on and so forth. Basically, this could be, much more sustainable than, just focusing on projects. This is what I can say right now.
Maybe from my personal experience, I think national agencies do advertise these opportunities. The question is whether the people who might use these opportunities even know about these national agencies. Because from what we discussed in several workshops, I believe there were at least several organizations here who continuously work with young people, but were completely unaware of these funding opportunities. So this is an issue.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I understand the question correctly, but I think maybe also, adding to the point you mentioned, maybe they don't know how to apply. Marcos mentioned, you're gonna spend months and months just applying for funding. And every organization, NGO, and you're an expert in that, should hire one just to kind of fill the applications. That's their work, and that's kind of time consuming. And so imagine young people, young, small initiative, small organization in a town or so, they don't have an expert to fill that. So maybe part of tomorrow's meeting, I have a lot of meeting in the agenda for tomorrow's meeting to discuss how can we help these organizations kind of, apply, not only to know that there are funding opportunities, but how to apply and how to follow up. And I think that's time consuming, speaking from experience, and I think that applies everywhere.
Marco, what would you say is the state of, is there anybody advocating for this to happen? Is there any push from youth organizations towards the European Commission or any of these programs regarding trying to either reduce the administrative load of the projects or trying to ask for more in terms of helping these organizations, such as many of you here, apply for these projects and programs?
There are initiatives, of course. It would be unfair to say that they don't exist. However, the question is whether they are effective and whether the methods they use are adequate. I would say that with this new program, lots of things went better. So we will see actually the effects in 2 years or so, because, we just started, less than a year ago. But there are organizations, they're mostly focused on Brussels. There's a European Youth Forum, which I'm sure that you're aware of. And within European Youth Forum, there is a whole, I would say, movement. Perhaps this is just too strong word to use for within one organization, but I would say that there is critical voices, that try to educate. I think this is the right word. Educate, decision makers and policy makers about how this is basically unsustainable and how this basically is killing the sector.
Any comments at this point? Do you have any experiences to share or questions to ask in regards to this particular topic? There's somebody.
Hi. Member of the Student Debate Society, I feel like it's kind of the correct type of me to step in. I feel like on the one hand, the experience of the Student Debate Society quite exactly reflect the experience that Anastasia, for example, brought out. Although the education is free and the connection to youth organizations in Europe should be quite accessible, it still isn't, because most of the people come from sort of elitist schools. However, I think that there have been things that have been done by the society to cater to people from areas where education isn't as strong, and they have also worked in engaging those kids to other youth organizations other than the youth. However, I myself, as a person who has been to Modern European Parliament, for example, quite a few times, which is, I think, quite a clear example of youth work being done by the European Union, still feel like the European Union is setting up programs which are sort of meant to fail in terms of engaging the youth. As you yourself said, often these programs come across as declaratory or stuff that doesn't actually work. So I think that my question would really be like, how is it possible to do youth work without actually engaging the voice of the youth? You yourselves point out that Greta Thunberg, for example, has been very successful in engaging youth people, like young people, whereas I feel like the European Union, even though engaging them, doesn't actually create sustainable solutions to amplify the youth voice that actually engage them in social discussion that exists in the European Union. So like, would it be able to make youth work better by engaging more young people, for example?
Okay, we can ask you.
I think that we oftentimes have the tendency to have rose-tinted glasses when it comes to everything that we do, and maybe like not see the entire picture. So I want to ask you, sort of related to what was talked about this now, do you have any experience with cynicism? Because I think that from like the very local goal, as it trickles down to the association, to the regional association, to the club, and so on and so forth, I think that sometimes it's like, I don't know, people don't because it's cool, because it's like something to hang out with a friend, and it's a different type of pitch. There's a lot of cynicism. What is this? I don't understand. I don't get it. I don't think it's cool. I thought the debating was about to come fighting for voice and stuff like that. So do you have experience in communicating or fighting against cynicism or diminishing cynicism in places which it might be more powerful than other places?
Would you like to
No,
respond?
I don't have anything to comment. I mean, it's a good one, but nothing to comment on. To be honest.
Is your question, sorry, just to understand, is your question how to make debate cool again?
No, it's how to have buy-in from the community for things that we think are cool, but that don't always fit in with their perception of cool, especially in communities where cynicism is very high regarding any sort of like authority, organized stuff.
You mean decision makers? Are you thinking? I mean,
Not just decision makers, but yes.
well, nothing to comment on, to be honest. except to inform them, maybe, you know, be close to them. And it brings back to the idea of lobbying. I mean, we lobby our ideas every day. I mean, debate is one way to lobby your idea, actually. So maybe lobbying them with their with the sense of humor or cynicism, in as you put it. I don't know. I mean, there's maybe a decision, an age gap, of course, because, you know, a lot of if you are young decision makers in Europe, I don't know if they are old or young, I can't even make a departure. And to be honest, I have a superficial idea to comment on you. So your question, so I don't have anything to comment. Maybe the lead here and
well, I'm going to try to connect both of the questions into one answer. So from my point of view and from my experience, that the biggest achievements when it comes to debate and debate clubs and various debate organizations happened when debate organizations, debate clubs, or any other entities that gather debaters, when they stepped outside into a community. When they, did something, and not only, talking about stuff, but also doing certain stuff. I would say that, if you put the money where your mouth is, or whatever the idiom is, if this exists or not, I'm not sure, then the community will see actually the use or the benefit of, funding this kind of stuff, and perhaps could, decrease the level of cynicism. Of course, what I'm saying here is very theoretical, and I'm not saying that this is something that, I'm not giving you a recipe, but I would say that, in communities, in small communities, where everyone knows everything about themselves, then if you go outside of school, and then, you talk about, you have a notion about whether GMOs is, morally justified or so on and so forth. And then later on after this, so this is what we acquired and we want to offer this to the community. So I really think that, that debate shouldn't stop, after the competition is done. But then the whole idea of the debate should actually start, because then if you have this kind of communication with community where you can offer something to the community, this might, to some extent, decrease this discrepancy between debaters and the cynicism in a community. And this is also linked with the first remark, which I wanted to tackle. And this is that, from my point of view, is local youth work per se is the key for basically everything. We can talk about the importance of advocating towards in Brussels, in European Commission, Council of Europe, and so on and so forth. And this is important. There's always going to be, professional youth organizations that are doing this kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that young people shouldn't be involved and informed and educated about how stuff works, how youth policy is being, made, created, and evaluated. But basically, if you do youth work within your own community, within the school, within, debate club, and you can make the real impact, I really think that this is the way how debate should, how today youth work should be done. And I think that we should develop this local youth work, doing small actions within community, and also, trying to use everything the debate has to offer. And by doing this together with, the advocating or lobbying work that is happening at the national level, or the European level, that this can be, just the mechanism or the recipe for success. So local youth work, working directly with young people on the problems that young people have, that they're facing with, this is something that we should perhaps put much more focus, and not necessarily, aim towards, changing policy or so. Because sometimes, it's much more important to give young people, structured quality time where they can play board games and then, discuss various strategies where you can use, your debate techniques about this kind of stuff, than, changing the policy within your youth advisory board.
Do we have any other questions at this point?
Yes, this is something that I was listening to the whole discussion. We are all talking about the participation, but without the debate. We need more active youth. So, Marco, do you know any projects on European level that foster local youth work or participation? Can you just share with us?
Thank you so much, Branimir, for this question. So there is one of my favorite projects right now happening. I don't know how many of you have heard about Europe Goes Local. Have you heard about this project?
No.
Yes, you have, Roban. Very good. So your executive director basically
Is involved. Yeah.
Yes, very much so. So this is the biggest youth work project in Europe. And 28 different entities from 22 countries of Europe, not European Union, is participating in this project with the goal of developing local youth work. So in each country, there's a national delegation, and there are lots of cities, municipalities, villages, that are involved in these projects, and they're trying to create the structure for quality youth work. This can be, creating structure for debate clubs, for youth centers, for youth participatory budgeting, and so on and so forth. But basically, this is something that exists since 2016, and it's been quite influential. But then, out of 50 people in this room, no one knows about it.
Yeah, I was about to ask, what is it with you guys and communicating maybe Boyan can answer, given that he's involved in the project. Why is it that people don't know about the massive, biggest even youth project there is not even in the European Union, in Europe currently? Where does this failure in communication happen?
My theory is that basically a lot of stuff fails where it's not necessarily for adult people, but less than young people thinking how young people are thinking. and then creating content and model of content to what this idea of what school and what's going to be, how to communicate and how this material will be consumed by the.
Okay, so you're saying they aged out of being cool and now they can't,
Well,
they can't reach anything.
you age out of understanding what's interesting to the population that you're working with. And it's very hard to accept that effect because you were that population just 5 years ago. On one extent, and on second, this stuff is inherently boring. So there's also it's also
Boring by default, another issue. Okay.
But it's also very important to create content that's when it's consumed is interesting. Like, young people don't have to know the strategic document, the policy baseline, and everything happening. But what they should be able to understand is, okay, these activities, these opportunities are popping up around me. That means that something close to this happening. So I think that also one thing is that these activities and opportunities are obviously not, popping up universally available to all young people. Because if you go, you'll probably find, clusters of people who are completely into all projects and voices and everything. And then, drive 10 kilometers away from their place to this benefit for. So I think it's a combination of these factors.
Thank you for a Europe goes local insider comment. Anybody else have a question? Or can we move on to this next thing I wanted to discuss with our panelists and you guys? So we've been talking about Erasmus and all these different programs in a kind of a Fortress Europe way, but these programs are actually not necessarily all focused only on European Union countries. And for example, the new Erasmus Plus program is massive. For the 7-year period, they have awarded, I believe, upwards to 27 billion euros for this program. Now, nominally at least, there are other countries outside of the European Union that can be involved in these projects. Guys, what's your experience on that front? Shadi, have you ever participated or know somebody in your community that participated in Erasmus Plus program? And Marco, do you think this is something that's actually happening, or is this connection that we can be making with other countries still underused?
Yeah, I'm aware actually of Erasmus and the universities I work at and other universities, they're active in these programs. But probably, as Marcus mentioned, that they are like short terms I mean, I don't want to make a judgment here, but maybe the impact isn't as much as that. Now, from higher education perspective, about Horizon 2020, and this is actually opportunities for the association and for the societies to get involved with the universities in applying to Horizon 2020. Now you have a higher education body that could back you up. I mean, researchers like Marcus and I'm sure other university activists who are interested in this idea. So maybe you want to think of making an alliance or maybe expanding your alliances with universities where Horizon 2020 is the funding much more because it goes into research and that would help. Yeah, these projects actually Erasmus that I'm aware of are based on exchange of students for a couple of months. You just or visitors to the universities here and there, but that's from university perspective. But again, I think maybe we should consider working with another universities, researchers, maybe just to probably one way to get involved into Horizon 2020. I don't know, maybe this is a crazy idea, but I don't know how it works here in Europe. Things are different back home, but I don't know, maybe that's a could work. I don't know what your take on this.
Well, when it comes to Erasmus and engaging, we don't call the third world countries right now. We call it program countries and project countries.
Program and partner
countries. Yeah. I mean, of course, there is there are some organizations that use this opportunity, but the problem is that, money that you receive for this organization is much lower than you receive for the program country, for participating program countries. Of course, within youth policy in European Union, there is a strength that wants to focus on Eastern Partnership countries and also the Mediterranean countries per se. So there are some, funds that are available for this kind of stuff. However, I believe that Europe right now is very Europe-centric because it tries to, rebuild itself and build this European identity, try to overcome the democratic deficit that there is, and try to actually to establish this participation structures in more inclusive way. So basically this puts as a secondary goal, despite the fact that there are some awesome practices happening within youth work outside Europe that we can learn from. For instance, in Australia, over there, the whole idea about youth research and the connection between youth research and youth organization is tremendously impactful and important. Also, lots of great stuffs are happening in India when it comes to debate, if I'm not mistaken. What we have to be aware that despite the fact that we of course have to focus on our youth and try to advance existing structures within Europe, that we have to be open towards the influences of other countries and not be very ethnocentric, because sometimes we are, and sometimes we just think that we're the center of the world.
This is something I wanted to ask about, because we keep on talking about these issues of European youth, and these projects tend to be most focused on them. And this includes stuff like a lack of media literacy, susceptibility to fake news and propaganda, very polarized political stances regarding some issues having to do with culture, religion, and so on. So in these terms, whatever's happening in for and to the youth in the European Union is a result and is a reflection and is a reaction to also things happening somewhere else. For example, we here have several participants that are here through the Anna Lindh Foundation, and they were previously participants of their Young Mediterranean Voices program. So we are talking about basically neighboring countries, right? Some of these countries are literally European Union's next door neighbors. And now the question is whether the European Union, who does have the funding to support cooperation, whether it's doing enough in order to really extend it across its borders to make sure that we, as Shadi said earlier, communicate more and have more of an experience of what life looks like across the border. Shadi, what are the main takeaways? And I think this has to do with your research regarding media literacy. What do you think are the biggest issues that come forward when we don't encourage this kind of cooperation?
I mean, that displays into that question. We have a survey about the annual report, which, as I mentioned earlier, the report actually kind of examines, surveys how people across the shore, the two shores of the sea, how they know about each other. And I mean, we thought, or we think, with the social media that it kind of managed to bridge the gap of communication or intercultural relations, but it does not actually. And I think we don't work together. I mean, we don't know about it. I mean, the TV actually still has an influence. Young people, old people in the southern eastern Mediterranean country or Europe still rely on TV as a main source of information about the other. And we know of history that TV didn't bring us closer, to be honest. So we thought new media would solve it. I think no. I think it's so new media and social media can help, of course, and this should be more organized work because few of us have been here and there, but that's not on a massive basis. This is more with individual choice of knowing the other. So I think organizations, local organizations that should cooperate on a regional level, that probably could help more, because relying on TV media, brings us stereotypes about the Arabs, stereotypes about the Eastern Europeans, stereotypes about the Western Europe, and that's probably is counterproductive to the idea of bringing us to it. So I think to cut it short, local, organizing between cooperation from local levels between young groups, university schools, probably is a solution than relying on the media. And I know the media is a researcher, but to be honest, I mean, from the data we see, it does not help. I mean, it's not. I mean, it can help, but it does not help, unfortunately.
So we need more.
Yeah, we need more on the actual initiative that you have been discussing this morning and today, that maybe, we need more on focusing on how to bring Libya society from Jordan with its counterpart in France, maybe. So that's kind of probably would enrich the cooperation, but also makes young people know about each other, kind of diminish these negative stereotypes about the other. That's probably works much more than relying on mainstream media, which is the case. Most people, based on the data, based on analyst report, they still rely on TV as a main source of information about the other, which is actually not really helpful. So.
Thank you. Okay, Marco, theoretically, I could write an Erasmus Plus project that tried to bring together partners from, for example, Croatia, and a partner from Morocco, and a partner from Germany, which is also a European Union country, and a partner from Tanzania. Is it likely that this project is going to pass? Why and why not? Or if I had a significant immigrant or refugee population of young people in my city and wanted to do a cooperation, for example, with an organization from Afghanistan, which I can nominally do under the Erasmus Plus program. So I can have outside countries, organizations for outside of Europe countries as partners. Is this something that's likely to happen?
I mean, it really depends, and I really don't want to speculate about, because of there are various factors that influence the quality of projects. But what I can definitely say is that I would like to see more of these kind of projects, because they might exist, but they're not so visible. They're not often promoted as good practices. And of course, when we gather here in this forum, a bunch of people working with young people, we don't know much about it. So I would say that, I would like to see more, because then, we would just, swift away from this Eurocentric perspective that we often have.
Does anybody have an experience in trying to apply for a project that featured a non-EU country, or maybe anything else to add regarding this topic of trying to connect young people within and without European Union through the kind of funding we have available? Yeah.
Yes, I've worked for different international NGOs and organizations. I remember we have done one. You can include like European Union countries, and it's part of the program. But the organization should be like part of that. And there is a list of organizations that are eligible. And generally, when you do it again, for example, we have 5 organizations. 3 should be from the European Union, and 2 can be like non-EU countries. But partner countries, there is like the list. And I want to make one comment, if it's possible, about like the first question answered.
Sure.
When we talk about this dialogue now between the European Union and like neighborhood and the neighborhood, for example, there is the Conference of the Future of Europe now. It's going to happen like in June, and in general, this is made like build the gap of democracy between like citizens and institutions. And the point is that the European Union policies, they affect also countries that are not part of the European Union. But the Conference of the Future of Europe is not eligible for the non-EU countries. So we talk about European Union policies, we're going to talk about this, and about like also our foreign action. But the point is that these countries are not included. Our policies have like effects on this country. So this is something that I'm advocating with the Italian civil society organization for the Conference of the Future of Europe. include those with all the counties where problems are affected. Nothing more than just
The broader region.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, everyone. I'm quite active in organizations, so I have experience with Erasmus Plus. I decided to outreach to new countries, but from my opinion, it's easier to have experience in Erasmus Plus. I think it's hard to organize a project with non-EU countries just because of administrative things you have to do. I also didn't like this rule that you have to have balance between EU and non-EU countries because they wanted to have a lot of non-EU countries, so we couldn't. We have to have the same balance. And also, I really like the fact that with another organization we established cooperation with Caribbean part of the world because there are overseas territories of EU countries. It's not non-EU country, but I think it's completely culture. So I think that it's a great way to foster like cooperation between different countries. But it's a little hard to achieve.
Anybody else?
Yeah, maybe to briefly point out on the last thing that what we're seeing in the Netherlands is that the national agency, half of the youth exchanges that they funded in the last round went with partners in Curaçao and mobile partners at Dutch tourism. So there does seem to be an increase. As long as you nominally fit within Europe in some way, we are able to step outside of the continent of Europe.
And especially if a tropical island is involved, I think.
I would like to go to Aruba.
So that's what people have the tendency to try to seek out those sorts of destinations. Okay, if there's no any other comments, I would finally like to ask the question for both panelists. What do you think is the future of or the potential role of debate in youth participation? So how can it link young people with decision makers to a more effective way?
Essentially a party, I don't know, maybe at some point with organized party or a faction that could be. And again, I'll go to the main point I gave you determined to emphasize it, that I mean, rather than being on the margin, I mean, excuse me for using this word, but as an activity being on the margin, maybe if the society of the idea of debate allied with research and innovation institution producing curriculum to be within the school system, maybe then you'll produce an army of graduates who have debated their idea and maybe potential advocates. Other than that, you'll be still working on locally with under the radar. I use this word, but I don't know if that's my take. So again, maybe you should think of expanding the idea to be formal within the education. I mean, it's a hard work. I know it takes time. We're talking about how hard is it to convince decision makers in Europe and everywhere, to be honest. But you know, that's probably. I mean, they should think about it, debate within society.
Yeah, on the same note, basically, I would like to see a step towards the professionalization of debate and debate coaches. I mean, it would be awesome if you would have, competence standards for debate coach to see, what you need to know in order to, just to deliver debate programs in your respective countries. Also, I completely share my colleagues' point of view. I think that cooperation between, youth organizations that provide debate programs and university is a crucial one in a way to, formally being recognized at a formal education program. So it would be nice to have, something that in the US exists for ages right now. And this is some kind of, university program that educates debate coaches or, has some kind of stuff to do with debate per se. And also for me, it would be very interesting, to have a rigorous research, both qualitative and quantitative, about the effects, methods, and ways how debate is being executed and delivered in various contexts. So, you know, coming from this academia part of site, of course, as you can see that I'm pushing the water towards my mill. But I would really like, you know, to see this closer cooperation. I think that this is how debate can, you know, take this extra step and perhaps become much more important, in the absence of a better word, actor in the field.
Okay, any questions? Yes, we have one. Dan is on it.
Where, sorry?
Here.
Actually, it's not a question, it's like extra answer for your question, and I would rely on my real experience, also from Palestine, because I was part of the debate hub, and to use a good tool to reach the decision maker, we use public debates. So maybe we ask debaters to prepare for a certain topic. And we also invited decision makers and like audience, and it was like public, anyone can read. And we always ask debaters to give like alternative, to give like things that decision maker can take and apply. And for so many times we succeeded. We find that on the local level it was more successful. Because it's easier to bring the decision maker, and it's easier like also to apply the policy that the debater like discuss or suggest. But in general, we find this is very effective way sometimes to apply like good decisions and to change somehow, and sometimes only just to raise the awareness of public about certain policies. So I think like public debates could be one of the tools that you can really reach decision maker.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay.
Just to expand a little bit what he was saying, I think we have a similar experience in public debates, trying to include public personalities and mostly local politicians. A step forward that we try to make and that we are trying to make in this recent period is to include actually not just as an audience the politicians, but to make them debate. And this connects also to what was asked before about how to take them nearer to the debate board. It is actually working on a shame level, I think, because they are realizing that politicians do not have the same ability that high schoolers have, not just to find information, but argumenting and what debate is about. So I think the main power aspect that we have is just being able to transmit not the competitive side of debates, but the skills that are transmitted through debates, not just to students, but also to politicians. And when politicians, especially on a local level, are put in front of students or high school students that are really much better than them at expressing what they are thinking, and they are expressing logical thoughts and the same politicians are not often able to express, then they feel really ashamed. And when we ask them to do debate, they will really put a lot of effort in it. And so our hope is obviously to bring this kind of formal and strategy and methodology of speaking in also parliament and public spaces for them too. But I think this is a strong move from us to include them, make them debate, make them understand how hard it is, but also how effective it is.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, and finally, I have the question for the audience, which is, have you been able to utilize debate in your communities, countries, cities, wherever, to a practical degree? So instead of just using it as a academic discipline or a competitive activities, what are the ways in which you manage to step out of your debate clubs and maybe do something that had a wider effect in any way, whether on local policies, whether on the local community? What are these experiences? Yeah.
Yes, hi everyone. I would like to tell about the project which I consider to be quite successful, which took place in Ukraine. It was called public debate in Hromadas, and Hromadas is a Ukrainian word which cannot be translated perfectly. But yes, it's a community, but in Ukraine it's kind of a new experience, which means that people are creating their local communities, which serve as alternatives to local administrative authorities. And yeah, so they are basically voluntarily acting voluntarily based. And those people, they are mainly not young yet, and it's especially interesting for us because debate is mainly focusing usually on youth. And those people are were like who took part in our project in their 40s or even 50s, and they did want to improve something in their local communities to make a productive dialogue with stakeholders, decision makers, local politicians, and so on and so on. And there was a real demand, and there is still a real demand for them to learn debating skills. And yeah, for a week or two, we were holding a series of trainings. And the long-term impact of this project was them organizing debate clubs in their local communities. And we have reached out many Ukrainian regions, and the result was that in many universities, in many local communities throughout Ukraine, debate clubs were created. And they were active, and there were even some parents who engaged their kids, or some leaders of parental communities who created debate clubs in their schools, and those kids took part in our tournaments, which is really, I think, a real great view and alternative view on target audience, which we are sometimes neglecting, like not the youth, but actually leaders, local community leaders. So I think this is a great example.
Thank you. Anybody else? Up there.
Yeah, my experience is a little smaller with on a local level. As we have a problem with political communication, especially, and transmitting what politicians are thinking to young people. One experience that I think was pretty effective in our small town. A few years ago, we had a very important referendum on the national scale, so popular votes were to pass a bill or not pass a bill. And what happened was that we organized this debate, especially on the argument of that special bill. And you had like 16 or 17 years old being informed about it, studying the argument and explain them. And explain the argument to 18 or 19 years old, which were at their first time voting. So they were not so able to have such information from the traditional media or even social media, because politicians do not communicate very much with young people. But having younger people, or anyway, almost peers, having this debate with the debate board that we know so pretty partial with every idea possible inserting that. Made them more aware of what they were voting about, and probably I don't have specific others, but I think that's something that for the audience of that specific debate was increased a little bit, not just the awareness, but the will of voting for that thing, because they were understanding it a little bit better. So that's our speed.
Okay, anybody else? Yeah, we have a hand in the back.
So in Estonia, we had a project that was achieved by Ministry of Justice, I guess. It was done for prisoners to put them in debate and solve their problems by debating. The debate society helped people to understand what is debate. They teach him, because it's not possible just to us in prison for prisoners, but yeah, it was made with Russian prisoners or Russian prisoners. And also we had not like a project, but I know that in many schools, teachers who knew that some of children knew debates, they just do it to make debates in classes, or just like in some day instead of classes,
Anybody else?
I mean, I can also offer perhaps two
Yeah.
brief examples from the Netherlands. One of them was set up by IDEA, and this was a debate in the neighborhood program where we had a workshop about it as well as conference. We used debate to start kids in low-income ethnic neighborhoods to think about improvements in the neighborhoods and talk about it with local politicians. And similarly, initiated a dialogue between the local police and the local youth to increase understanding there. But secondly, a group of former debaters became part of the board of the National Youth Council and have helped setting up a national debate in our parliament, which will always involve the members of the Parliamentary Committee on Youth and Education Affairs, where they bring in large amount of ideas of what they want to see have improved on those type of issues. And the kids beforehand very often get both a lobby and a debate training before they simulate a round of parliament. So these nations, I think, really pretty additive to deal with. And the National Youth Council is particularly good at getting kids on board with parliaments predominantly represented and are not part of the lead.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wants to share their experience? Okay, if not, I would like to thank you all for participating at this event and the entire forum. We hope you got some ideas about how you can get some support, including funding, which everybody sorely needs. I hope you got some ideas regarding the ways in which you can use debate to achieve some sort of change or political engagement or participation in your communities and countries. And finally, some ideas on the venues for enabling and establishing cooperation between countries within and without the European Union. And finally, I would like to invite forward Boyan, who is way in the back, so I'm literally inviting him forward to deliver some closing remarks for the forum. Now this is like as if we were at a wedding.
I appreciate the closing ceremony.
Ask you to get back to the slides and show something on the screen.
Listen, we can sit there.
Yeah.
We don't need. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So, hello everybody. And these are the names I'm going to mess up a little bit later. Just a second. Move everybody to the other screen. Okay, so hello. After we've done this quick and seamless transition into the closing part of our event, I would really like to thank everybody who attended. Some of you still have some work to do tomorrow, so I look forward to seeing you at the IDEA General Assembly. Some of you get to have a day off. Some of you have to get a day in which you get PCR tested, so you do not test home. But we will deal with that later. At this point, also, I want to take this off. So I would like to really thank everybody for attending. I would very, very much like to thank the group of people who actually volunteered to hold the workshops. I must say I can't recognize all of you, but I would like if you would. If you held a workshop during this event, if you could please stand up so we could thank you all. Thank you very much. We actually got a lot of positive feedback from the participants. You probably talked to each other that people really enjoyed being included in the events. And also we got feedback from you that you enjoyed that this was not a type of event in which we spread the knowledge, but you actually share experiences and share the knowledge with yourself. I would like to thank also Anna Lind Foundation, who allowed us to have a very fun group of participants, but also a very useful group, who also contributed quite a lot to this event, and also for communicating with us and supporting the idea of spreading debate and open communication in the MENA region. I would also like to thank new members of IDEA who first time attended this event. I would also like to thank potential members of IDEA who attended this event, and of course, not to be forgotten, because it's the old members, but also to those who are being on youth forum for several times, even though this was a, let's say, there was a hiatus in having youth forums. And I really, really hope that we will see each other in 2022 in a larger or summary type of setting with less PCR tests, less masks, and less everything that was brought down on us in the last year. I would also like to especially thank 3 people that are standing in front row, standing in front row. So Dan, Margarita, Anastasia, thank you for they hate the most being put on the spot like that. So, but really, thank you for all the work. Basically, that's it for me. I have nothing else. I'm really grateful for you to attend. I also want to mention that those of you who held workshops, we would like to invite you also to take your personal gift / thank you back from IDEA to you. They are on the table back there next to Micha. He's not protecting them, he's just working there. So don't be afraid to approach him. And I would like to share with you just a small reminder of what we were doing here, how it looked like, and why we're here, through a short little movie. Still in production because I didn't get all the signatures I asked for yesterday. This is just a nice reminder to those who need them. And thank you for those who sent them. And this is it. Thank you, everybody. After this movie is over, enjoy your day. Stay, feel free to mingle. We do have this space if you need to talk with each other a little bit more. And if not, see you at the end. Yeah.
But it's a nice shot.
Oh.